This is the MFG Monkey Podcast. We sit down with leaders and innovators in the industry to talk about manufacturing, business, and the stories behind their successes. I'm your host, Dustin McMillan, owner and founder of McMillan Co. Scott, welcome again, buddy. How are you?
Great, Dustin. Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing this for a couple months, and we've had a little trouble getting our schedules to link up, and we finally did it today. So,
well, I have to say before we get started, congrats to the Buckeyes.
Oh yeah, thank you.
I have to ask you a question though. Is Ryan Day still in the hot seat if they lose to Michigan again?
Yes,
Yes,
1,000%. People will be calling for his job 100% if he loses to Michigan again.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, but I mean, he bought himself from a little bit of grace by winning a national championship, right?
So, only in Ohio State would that not be good enough.
I know, right? The visit to the White House was pretty impressive. That was fun with JD Vance and him fumbling the trophy, and they blame it on JD, but there's a little bit of handoff issues.
There was a bad handoff there. Probably the only bad handoff they had in the second half of the season.
I know, right? But it looked like they were having fun. I think that it's a lot of fun. I don't want to get off on a political rant, but one of my best friends was at the wrestling tournament that Trump was at, and my buddy is not a Trump fan. And he goes, after I left, I was sitting 7 feet away from him, and he goes, after seeing him interact with all of the athletes, he goes, I like the guy. He goes, there's some things that I don't really care about, but he goes, he was just genuine, and he engaged with every athlete that came over to him, and he goes, it was really impressive.
So that's kind of refreshing to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of, I don't know, you hear different things, but to hear from, my buddy that isn't a huge Trump fan to really start, to warm up with him and that it's interesting. So,
yeah, that'd be great if he could connect with some people. Certainly.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, it's cool that he likes the sports and he shows up and all the cheering and all that stuff. But so it's definitely interesting times and you and I were talking before we got on here. Business is good and even in light of what's going on in the stock market and I don't know. I have a super positive outlook on everything.
We do too. We've never been busier, and even as we speak, we have a couple opportunities this week. And we're a capital projects firm. It takes us a while to find and convert opportunities. And the capital expenditures from our customers, heavy industrials, have never been as busy as they are right now. A lot of them are driven by a couple of certain segments, certainly, but they're spending money, which means that they're not forecasting a long-term downturn.
No, and we're doing the same thing. I mean, we just put in a bunch of machinery, and I thought about you as we were going through it because we made mistakes and we had to pour new concrete and things like that. I'm like, I probably should have gotten Scott involved in this. We were just on a tight budget and we were doing things on our own, but we're slated to spend more money on more machinery, and there's another blending line that we're looking to put in sooner than later. That could be our biggest investment ever for us, and we're looking at over $1 million spend on a blending line. So we're super optimistic about how everything's going.
That's great to hear, and likewise, we've continued to diversify and pursue some works in parallel markets. That's going well. I'm hesitant. I almost want to knock wood here a little bit because, as we do know in business, what goes up does come down, and we're trying to get in different sine waves with our deliverables so we can kind of withstand some of the volatility that's certainly to come for whatever reason. Whether it be, inflation's back in the conversation again, But the nice thing for us is the workforce development is kind of waned. We're finding people in the work now, which is great.
Yeah, and we are too, and we're out in rural America, and the population around us is very thin because we're so far out in the country, and we've been really lucky about finding folks to work, and when you're out in the country, you find good working farm boys and girls that that know how to work, and they're not afraid to work, and they know what a long day is. So we're very fortunate.
It's great to hear. Congratulations. We have the same workforce, Upper Midwest. People that are very conscientious, come to work every day,
Yep.
and care about what they do and what they make. And at the end of the day, they say thanks. And so, yeah, we travel a lot. Our projects are all over
Hmm.
the place, and it's nice when we get back close to home.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we last time we kind of winged this, and this time your girls put us on an agenda. So thank you, Amanda and Emily, for for keeping us on track here. But just real quick, we're gonna a couple of things that we want to talk about today is your company's future and direction, industry trends, and how leadership adapts to the evolving market conditions. Which I think that's a very fun topic for
Mm-hmm.
any of us to talk about. Um, Share some personal experiences and challenges. I think your duck hunting story that you're telling me before, everyone uh, needs to learn on a personal level, and then I'm sure that there's some personal experiences in business that we can chat about as well. Managing supply chain issues, which is a very valid topic right now, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a little bit of uncertainty as um, things you may have been buying from overseas that you're certainly maybe scrambling to resource now, which I personally think is a good thing. Uh, Growth and scalability. That's a that's a really good topic as well. Adapting to digital transformation, AI. We were talking about that before we came on. Um, I was kind of afraid of AI, and then one of my buddies owns an AI company, and he spent 3 hours on a meeting with me, and I use it every day now.
Mm-hmm.
ACI's evolution, yeah, evolution of milestones, systems integration, and automotive and aerospace sectors, and then future trends and systems integration. So you pick some fantastic topics here, and uh, some that I'm pretty excited to talk about. So,
Well, I can tell you, as we talked last time, we talked a little bit about the DISC assessment, and
hmm, oh yeah,
my registration there is a high I. Amanda and Emily are oftentimes forced with trying to keep me on track
yeah.
because I
Well,
can't help
my
it.
yeah, my assessment is adaptive in these things. So I'm a very high D, low I. It's like a check mark,
Yeah.
and um, I do a DIS assessment with my folks just so they understand me,
Mhm.
and when I'm asking questions, I'm not being condescending or rude. It's just my personality, uh, and I've definitely gotten in trouble for that.
No,
they
yeah.
they think that I'm questioning, their work ethic or whatever. I'm like, no, it's just me being inquisitive, and it may come across that way.
Well, you know what? We certainly know works. I mean, those assessments, if they're taken honestly,
Hmm.
yield some pretty fair results. And for us, the biggest tool coming out of that is not necessarily what our strengths or weaknesses are, but who you're talking to and how do
Yes.
you communicate with them in a way they can receive it. And when you look
Yep.
at it that way, it becomes very beneficial. And we
Yeah.
talked about it last time, but across our organizations, communication strategies are the most important thing we can do. And the disc for us has been. It sounds like we're a disc commercial, but it works very well. Certainly.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of forgot about it until you and I talked about it, and then I was hiring a new person, and my buddy's like, have them take a disc test. Like, why wouldn't you do that? And I'm like, we
Mhm.
got away from it in the last couple of years, and did that, and we talked about it in the interview, and it certainly helps me understand what motivates them and what demotivates them, and just puts us on the same page, and I can help it helps me communicate tremendously. um I I think the first time I ever was exposed to disc is when I was selling homes as a young adult, and I thought everyone cared about certain things that I cared about, and then I realized people don't really care about this shit. So I just would skip over it if I understood their personality fast enough, and it's a huge help.
Well, as an I too, I have a tendency to tell stories as I talk about the topics that interest me. I was a young engineer working for a company in Chicago selling concrete admixtures. They had
Okay.
a very sophisticated sales
Yeah.
process, and it was really beneficial to me because I came out of a DOT job or a retirement job first, and moved into the sales role. And my boss, a great guy, we're going out to our number one client in suburban Chicago and presenting our data for the year's sales. And he was going, and a lot of it was cookie cutter stuff that he had me put together. And I was going to go second. He was up presenting first. And as we were talking, the CEO of the company and his VPs were all there, 5 people, big company. And his admin came in with a birthday cake, all lit up, right in the middle of the presentation. And the CEO couldn't take his eyes off the damn birthday cake. And so I get up there and I'm getting ready to talk. And I had like 24 slides on chemical usage last year. This guy doesn't care at all about last year.
Right.
And so I look at it, and my boss I was relatively new. I said, you know what, Gary, we're not going to talk about this today. This is about last year. Let's have cake, and then we'll actually talk about next year when you finish. He came over, and my boss looked at me and glared for a minute. And he came over and shook my hand, and he's like, that's the best idea you guys have had all day. But it was just one of those things, right? It was like being able to adjust and talk to the people you're meeting with, understanding what they're coming from.
Yeah. Well, and then you built rapport with him. You were on his agenda and not yours.
Yeah.
And he recognized that, and he wanted to eat the cake.
He wanted to eat the cake.
Yeah.
He wanted the cake and to eat it too.
Yeah. And that's what he got. So good stuff. Well, what do you see ACS doing in the future and the industry trends that you're looking at?
Yeah, it's a great question. And from my perspective, to look forward, you have to look back. And, how did we get here? Are we where we want to be? And are we who we want to be? Some existential questions where you say, self-understanding, critical thinking, what's your identity? And we've spent a lot of time on that because you mentioned when we started to talk, you have a lot of work with one customer right now. And we do too. And at one side, it's fantastic. It's record-breaking for us. It's providing opportunities to our firm and to our people. On the other hand, it's a lot with one customer. Yep. And so a big part of our growth strategy is our continued focus and commitment to our diversification strategy. And when we say that, it's about staying true to our guiding principles, first and foremost, not losing our identity there, but taking the skill sets and the people we have today and leveraging it into some new things. And so we have real 3 phases for that, Dustin. The first phase is delivering new applications to existing customers. I think most people know here that we that listen to you in the past or listen to us in the past, we focus on engine and vehicle tests and production facilities, both for automotive and aerospace. Those are our 2 core markets. So we're delivering new applications to these folks: electrification, alternative fuel systems, software solutions, genset testing, things that we hadn't been doing as a strategy, been more reactive in the past. We're doing it now as a focus, and that's driving growth, certainly. The second phase was to expand our customer base in our core markets. So we actually opened an office in Detroit a few years ago. We've continued to add resources there. We've added 2 more BD folks, sales folks, that are very technical, selling both controls and data acquisition solutions, because as we know, the world is getting blurry between automotive manufacturing and technology companies because of what cars are becoming. They're becoming, Apple phones with 4 wheels. And so we've got a couple of new BD folks that are really focused on that can also take those conversations into capital projects as well, not just technical solutions. And then the last is to develop a new market. And, a few years ago, we went into aerospace, and that's going really well. We're right on the cusp of winning our first whale project there. We're doing the design work for it right now. The customer has to move the program forward. We can't control that. We can just only provide them what they've asked us at a high level. And so that aerospace diversification strategy is going really well. I talked to you about our SEO and our website. We just got a really good lead from a major aerospace company over in Michigan that's been a whale for us in the last 18 months, and it continues to grow. But we're also looking to maybe to go one step further outside transportation and get into industrial manufacturing facilities. Yeah. Because there's a lot of requirements. As you know, you just talked about putting a new process line. That process line needed building infrastructure and process infrastructure to support it. You needed, air and water and power. And if you put the substation the opposite side of the line, it's going to cost you a lot of money to run that cable across the plant. There's things like that. And how you're going to collect the data, how you're going to manage the control systems. A lot of parallels in that marketplace. Now, it's a huge marketplace. We have not come to terms on our swim lane yet. And so right now we've done a couple of projects in white goods for manufacturing companies. We've done some engine manufacturing and some battery manufacturing. But that's kind of where we're at in terms of our growth strategy. We're going to stay core to our identity, but just try to expand it.
Yeah. And it's so important. to have that process with the you know the the hardscape, if you will, of the line that you put in. Because if you can put the greatest line in, and if you don't have process on how to actually operate the line and train your folks, I mean, the line does no good. And with us, with putting our new line in, we were doing it in tandem, and we're becoming ISO certified this year. So it was really everything was coming together because we were able to do our ISO, a lot of our ISO documents alongside building the line out and having the drawings, and it, all the people really understood our process because we were also designing our documents at the same time. So
We
that's really interesting that you guys are doing that along with the the design and build out.
Well, I got to give a shout out to our marketing team again because our integration services, we branded them and they're called In Tandem. And,
Awesome.
and,
Yeah, that's cool.
and you just mentioned that we were doing things in tandem. And
Yeah.
that is one of the challenges when you do integration projects is that
Yeah.
there's a lot of moving parts and you got to be able to
Yeah.
coordinate those. And our process is plan, execute, verify. And I'll talk
Yeah.
about it more in our conversation today. But the other two things in terms of our growth, we've considered an M&A strategy. And we found 4 firms we liked, were good fits. We just couldn't afford them, and we couldn't come to terms. Maybe it's because our Midwestern roots were a little too conservative, but just didn't fit. We haven't shied away from that. It's just not our core strategy. We've also worked to develop more strategic relationships with our supply chain, and we're fortunate to work with some people like Siemens and National Instruments, Electro-Automatique and we've developed relationships, and they're bringing us opportunity. We're taking it back, and they're creating some recurring revenue streams for us that we didn't have in the past, based on some of our capabilities and some of our positions in the aerospace and automotive marketplaces. But at the end of the day, what are we doing in the future? We're going to stay. We have 5 key deliverables. One's the EPC of capital projects, high performance buildings, test systems design and manufacture, integrated PLC controls, LabVIEW data acquisition, and facility integration services. And we branded our data acquisition Accelerant. We branded our integration services In Tandem. And that's driving some of the growth too. We're a small company, right? The people that we work with are, 6 zeros behind their revenue versus ours. But we feel it's a privilege to work with them, and we're trying to grow with them.
Yeah. Well, and it's so important to understand your market, and we went through that as well, and who our target audience was, and who we wanted to work with, and how we wanted to work with them, and just telling your story in a way that attracts those folks, and telling it cleanly and engagingly, and doing it in a teaching manner, and it seems like you guys do that.
Yeah, we sure focus on that. I think we get engaged for 3 reasons. It's the technical expertise, it's our flexible delivery, and then it's accountability for performance. We can only do that if we learn what the customer needs are.
Yeah,
So our people
absolutely.
have to be good listeners. And if they're not, we come out of the gate really behind the 8 ball. And so we focus a lot internally on listening strategies and communication strategies for that reason.
As you guys grow, what mistakes have you made in the growth, and what did you wish you knew that you know now?
So do we have 3 or 4 hours for this one? I mean, that's a loaded
5
question.
minutes. 5 minutes. No.
Yeah, so what would we do different? And I've got some notes on that. But the reality of it is, it's be a better listener, because the number one reason projects struggle is the failure of the owner to adequately define the requirements, and that's on us as a supplier to make sure we understand what they are. So I've got mistakes along the way. It's been taking undue risk when we didn't have to. Most of our customers, and I'm going to throw them a rose here, aren't killing us on price. They certainly don't have unlimited budgets. But if we put together a scope document that meets their functional requirements and put a price on it, and we iterate through that and come to a goal to say, here's what you can get for the money you have. We like to do things open book, transparent on the front end, so they can see what the costs are. And more and more customers are getting away from the low bid, change order world, just because it doesn't work. I mean, you'll get a product, you'll have to work really hard to do it, and you'll probably feel like you paid too much for it. Where our MO is to say, let's jointly develop a process up front and put a scope to it, call it acceptance criteria, get stakeholders to sign it, develop a project charter. We know what done looks like. There's certainly going to be problems throughout the project. Unknowns come up, scope additions, scope removals. That's all part of it. But everybody knows what the playing field is. And so we get invited back. And so the challenges that we've gotten into are really about that. It's taking too much risk when we didn't need to. We talk about good stress and bad stress. Good stress drives organization preparedness. Bad stress is anxiety, and bad anxiety and sleepless nights. You can't control the sources of bad stress. One of our big challenges at ACS is sustaining the growth, because we're working in a big marketplace, but we don't have access to all the money in this marketplace. We have access to this much. And so how do we get in front of these folks that are sophisticated, very mature, have pretty rigid protocols for purchasing and employee engagement or customer engagement to fit our growth goals? And that's one of the big challenges. But I would say historically, the biggest mistakes that we've made have been taking on too much risk for technical risk for things that haven't been done before. And it's hard not to. Okay? We have a bunch of engineers like to build things. The more uncertainty, the more they get excited about it. And we're like, once in a while we'd like to get called back to do the same thing twice.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up a really good point, just being transparent. And for the first time I was really transparent with a customer, because they had a target price for something, and I was just struggling there's no way to get to it. Right. And finally I'm like, I'm just going to put everything in a spreadsheet, and we're going to sit down and talk through it. And, where they wanted to be at, say it was $1, they had 90 cents in it. That was just hard cost, and you couldn't get away from it. And for them to have a target price of $1, nobody's can afford to do it for 10 cents. And it's just unrealistic. It's unreasonable. And they're like, we really didn't think about it that way, and they were doing it internally, and they were outsourcing the project to us. And they're like, one, we never tracked our costs well enough to understand, like, we were losing money, in our process. And then now for us to have this target is unrealistic. And I'm like, well, this is where it's at. This is the price that we could do it for. And, and it is what it is. And we cut some things, we shaved some things off, and they're like, okay, that looks good to us. It's still going to save us a little bit of money and process improvements there and things like that. So it was really interesting for me, piggyback on, just being transparent.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The issue is in my industry is that the marketplace has done it to it themselves. If you call your buddy up who's got a concrete company down the road, he doesn't know what your project is, but you tell him you need 400 yards of concrete poured next Wednesday, he's got a price for that. He might not know you have to back down a country road 2 miles, get permits to cross 3 bridges, and by the way, the steel's not in yet. That's the kind of stuff that comes up that people don't have in their project plan. And all of a sudden you put it together and you say, hey, by the way, there's an extra 50 grand of task. And it's not optional. And people have the hard time getting their head wrapped around that. And it's because people give numbers out without thinking through it and trying to get work. We've been pretty lucky that most of our competition, we have 3 competitors, customer doing it themselves, an 800-pound gorilla, EPC firm that's very good, or local contractors and builders and designers that don't do this work all the time, that have relationships in the plant. And so, and each one of those has really good strengths, but are very viable competitors to us. We feel we can come on and take advantage of those companies' skill sets and deliver a more comprehensive and more effective delivery model that will deliver functional performance. And so most of the time we get invited into a customer, they've done it themselves and failed. I don't mean fail. It's been later, been cost more than they wanted to.
Sure.
And so we can come in and say, hey, we think we know our process works, and here's how we'll do it. And it's pretty transparent. It's pretty collaborative. And the customer, at the end of the day, it's their project and it's their money, right? And so we have to, like when you do your project, it's your money, and people have to realize that. And so, how do you spend the most? How do we get the most out of what we can for the money you have available?
Yeah, and we're certainly guilty of that, especially being a small company. It's like, okay, well, we can do this ourselves. Well, we have to do it ourselves, and we make mistakes along the way, and we have to
Sure.
redo things, and the electrician's back 5 times, and um, it's a learning curve, and then I probably a lot of folks go through that evolution where they get to a certain revenue and they're like, let's just farm this out. I remodeled my own kitchen when I was 18. Now I'm not 18 and I can afford it. Let's hire a professional to come in and design our kitchen, and it looks perfect when it's done. And I'm not redoing everything.
That's yeah. It's like anything, right? What you do, you're really good at what you do, and
Hmm.
so that's why you have business. There's a reason for that, and so finding the customers that appreciate and value that. I know we'll talk about that in a little bit. We tier our customers,
Hmm.
and one of the defining criteria is do they recognize the value that we bring, and are they willing to pay for it? And
Hmm.
depending on what their appetite is for that, we move them up and down with some other variables with respect to focus.
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of supply chain issues, if any, are you guys seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting. So everybody's talking about tariffs, right? We don't know anything
Yeah.
about tariffs yet because they're so brand new. I and we're certainly prepared to deal with that. But the supply chain issues that we've been dealing with for a couple of years are long lead items,
Hmm.
where there just wasn't available people to build the products, and it pushed projects way out, and they haven't fully reconciled yet, which means we may have some tariff scenarios on existing projects where budgets have already been set. Hasn't happened yet. But if we come back and our supplier is going to say, hey, it's going to go up 12 or 14 or 15%, it's got to be accounted for. It doesn't come out of our pocket. We
Hmm.
haven't seen that yet. There's been talk about it. There's been people preparing for that. I think that's the hot button of the moment. And it certainly should be. I kind of agree with you. I think long term, it's a good strategy to have. I know that there's two companies in our world, Wacker Neuson and JCB. JCB is one of the largest backhoe manufacturers in the world. They're based out of
Hmm.
the UK. They have a big facility in Pooler, Georgia. They just announced either 500,000 or a million square foot addition because they're preparing to sell product in America, which is their number one market.
Yeah.
Same thing with Wacker Neuson. They're going to do another $500,000 addition to their production facility because what they sell is be sold in America. And so, long term, I think leveling the playing field is a good thing. The reality of it is there's going to be some pain along the way, and like any change,
Sure.
right? And so, how much do we have to do that? Um, we also talk about the hangover from COVID on workforce. It's still there. It's different today, but like I mentioned ago, there's still 50 and 60-week lead times on process equipment for us that we can't get around,
Wow.
and our customers have no idea of this. And because if you're not looking for it, you're not looking for it. And all of a sudden
Yeah.
they come to say, "Hey, can we do this project?" And a lot of our projects are 12 to 14 months, Dustin. When you get a 12-month lead time on a piece of equipment, that's now 18 months without even
Right.
starting. And so we have to deal with that pretty regularly. I think the customer terms the terms are different, more difficult, more stringent. The pricing intervals are shorter. You get a price for a product, and if you don't buy it in 3 days, it changes.
Yeah.
So it's hard to establish budgets for our customers because that's our goal. Is we put together a scope with a price on it for our customer, and then we have to go out and validate those numbers and execute off of those numbers. When those change in between the conversations, we have egg in our face, no matter why it happened. So we have to add sometimes cost into that. We let the customer know, hey, there's contingency here because it has to be. It used to be the price of copper fluctuated so dramatically that you had to put
Hmm.
contingency on commodity prices. Today, it's on regular building products. It's on
Yeah.
concrete and steel, masonry units,
Yeah.
drywall. But I
And
think it feels like people are getting used to it. It's been around for a while. The conversation's been around for over a year, so it feels like people are prepared for the discussion. It's not so much of a surprise as it was, but it's just one of those things we all have to deal with.
yeah. Yeah. And I didn't really think about it. One of the machines that we bought, I thought it was a US made machine because of the conversations that we were having were with folks in the US, and pulled the trigger to have it made, and they wanted some product from us to test, and we get the ship to address, and it was just me moving too fast. I completely missed it. We're sending it to Canada. I'm like, we're paying $800 to ship and customs for $100 worth of stuff going into Canada to
Yeah.
for them to
Yeah.
test the machine that we just had built. And then they were 4 weeks behind making our machine, and then all this tariff stuff came in, and they're like, well, if we get hit with tariffs, we're passing that on to you. And I said, no, you guys are 4 weeks late. We'll cancel our purchase order, but I'm not paying 25% extra because you guys missed your deadline.
Right. Right.
And that was really the biggest thing that we've seen in with the tariffs so far. Um, with the Doge stuff, we had one customer say, you know, they they're they're a military contractor, and they were worried about the contract that they have being cut out, and it was for warfare uh, protection. So our war fighters, it was a safety item, and I'm like, Doge isn't cutting out safety for our our war fighters on in theater. So there's a lot of confusion I see with people's personal opinion and what they think Doge is doing and what it's not doing. And then the tariffs, I think, are the same thing. The tariffs are, from what you just said, going to help you guys tremendously because there's more infrastructure coming into the U.S. where you guys are going to be building out, lines and things for giant customers, potentially like JCB.
Well, we're a small U.S. based company, and we are going to continue to be a U.S. based company.
Hmm.
Two examples of the other side of not having the level playing field is we built a test skid for a large multinational OEM a few years back, shipping it to South America, and it was 100% tariff where it was going, and so they had to
Hmm.
pay. And so we ended up shipping it to a dock in Houston. They took ownership of it, and they paid the rest of it. But here's the
Hmm.
flip side: they did another one of those systems a year and a half later, and they had it designed and built in South America,
Hmm.
which is the driving force of having tariffs. We never
Hmm.
even had a chance to build it again. This company's based in the U.S. They build all their products, a lot of their products in the U.S. and for U.S. customers. This was going for a South American customer base; they're very large, but we didn't have an opportunity. Same thing happened 2 years later in China, where we built a skid for them, shipped it over there, and then they came back and said, "Can we just get the designs for that?" And they had them all built in China after
Yeah.
that, and we never
Well,
had an opportunity.
yeah,
So it's
and
just
yeah,
leveling the playing field.
it really is. And so countries have been doing that to us for decades, and we're finally doing it to other countries, and it's going. It can't not work. And I know that that's a personal opinion, and it may turn some people off. Maybe not too many of our listeners, but because they're probably on the same page. But I just the people that are really giving pushback, you're already seeing the positive effect, and there is a short term fallout where it hurts when you rip a band-aid off. It hurts, and then it goes away, and you're good.
Yeah.
So I'm again positive about everything that's going on, and your stories just really support that.
Yeah, I think the one thing we can be certain is uncertainty, is that there's going to be
Yeah.
negotiations and
Yeah.
adjustments and changes here, like any good business negotiation.
Yep.
And so I again hopeful, and I think it'll have the a long term it'll have the impact that we're hoping for.
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly think so. And then all those things go into growth and scalability. I mean, they're not stifling your growth and scalability. And I think if we go back to the Clinton era where we were shipping things overseas, it would probably stifle your growth and scalability a little bit because you're sending work overseas that we would have otherwise had here.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope when you start that too, because
Yeah.
you get, it's like selling to these large contracts, right? You gotta gear up to execute that work. Is it sustainable? That's not
Hmm.
that, and I think that's the question that isn't asked often enough. Is it what are we talking about here? Is this a sustainable scenario or
Yeah.
not? And if it is, let's deal with it in a sustainable manner. If it's not, let's treat it like the one off that it is and move on.
Yeah. Yeah. And we look at the same thing with new customers, and they want to grow with us, and we have to invest in machinery, a production line. We want to know that it's sustainable. So we're going to ask for a long term commitment. So if we put in a dedicated line, It's not Groundhog's Day every year, hoping that they send us more projects. It's okay if we're gonna invest in X number of dollars to put in a new line, then commit because we're gonna spend our money to help you grow, and we just need your commitment. Unless we screw up, then go somewhere else. But we'll do everything in our power not to let that happen. But we need some commitment.
We talk a lot about mutually beneficial relationships.
Hmm.
It's I don't know if this is the right comparison or not, but when you see the realtor pull up in the brand new import, you're kind of like, okay, they're successful. They've done a good job at what they do. You maybe not everybody, but maybe you take them a little bit more serious than the young guy that pulls up in the 8-year-old car that's just getting started in real estate.
Hmm.
It's the eye test, and
Hmm.
I think that's the thing that we talk about in our business is we have to earn the business, and then but it has to be beneficial for both of us. And the customer wants good customers want their suppliers to be successful too.
Yes.
And that's what I'm talking about. And if you can
Yep.
get to that point where they're fair, it's got to be fair. We all know that, but we all have a right to make money too. And I think when you can get to that point, that transparency, talk about what margins are. And it's funny, we get some of our people get poached by our customers once in a while, and I know what they pay them, so I know they can afford our rate, and
Hmm.
I just can't go tell them that.
Right.
And so, but if we get to that point where we're having that transparency, Dustin, and talking about, hey, we have to earn your business every year. We know that we have to earn it every day, and
Hmm.
because they have options, and as we both know, there's great competitors out there that can take our work tomorrow. And so, earning their work every day, and getting them to the point where they want us to be successful, because then they'll be successful. That's, I think, the place we're all shooting for.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And we've won business before because we saved somebody a penny on a widget. And I'm like, these guys they're not a long term customer. And I had one of my folks say, well, why do you think that? I'm like, well, because they left where they were at over a penny. They're going to do the same thing to us one day. And it's just a matter of time. And, it was like 4 years later, they came to us and said, hey, we need you to lower your price by X. And I'm like, well, it's been 4 years. We should be giving you a price increase, if anything, and we have it. And we're not going to lower our price a penny. And they left us.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it is what it is. Or I'm not even going to give them a call back because it's just, it's a vicious circle at this point.
It's you work so hard to get new customers, to find them, to build this trust, to earn their business. It's hard to lose them, but sometimes it's the best decision you ever
It,
make.
it really is. And the auto industry, I think, is just horrific at that. They want a 5-year price, but they want a price reduction by 5% every year. And it's like, how are we ever going to make this happen? Because things aren't getting less expensive; they're getting more expensive. And if you expect to shave 5% off for every year, it's 25%. That's unrealistic. You're not setting your folks up for success. And while you can improve process so much, um, when you're dealing with the auto industry, your process is pretty rock solid already, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the auto industry is just they're horrible at that.
Yeah, there's certainly some firms where the conversation starts in procurement or ends in procurement.
Hmm.
Um, those firms where the buyer gets pulled in at the end to renegotiate a scope and a price that's already been worked out with the technical teams. We struggle there.
Hmm.
We'll get opportunities where a engineering manager will say, "Hey, that's just too much money. We need to work together to bring the price down." So we'll do scope reductions and through design efforts, a lot of work, and you'll get down to a workable number. And then the buyer has to sign off on it, and they come back with a target price that's some nominal number,
Yeah.
5 or 10 or
Yeah.
15%. And and for one, I've been a big proponent at our firm of getting to know the buyers, because I do believe relationships are supremely important across all of our business
Absolutely.
connections,
Yep.
personally and professionally. But it can be tough because you have to play that buyer dance, and and I think they all know it. It's just not said. If you're working at a customer at an OEM, whether it be automotive or what industry it is, and you know they have this dance coming up, well, you're certainly building cost into the front end, and
Hmm.
so you can give it back. And and that's the great unwritten rule or conversation. Excuse me, that it's really not driving value. it drives
Hmm.
anxiety, drives bad anxiety, and
Yeah.
and that's not good. And so we try to get around. We've been very successful with a few firms that were pretty rigid. We came in and said, "Here's what we're going to do," and does this fit? And but sometimes they say no. That's not how we buy. So thank you, and on to
Yeah.
the next.
Yeah. And it's a good feeling when you get to that point where, you are mutually invested, and your customer wants you to be as successful as you want to be. And we've, again, went down the path where, we quoted a million widgets to make, and our price was really good, and we needed the business at that time. And they came back and beat me up over a penny, and I gave it to them, and I gave it to them because they committed to, you know, they had us quote 700,000 pieces, and then they said, well, what if we give you a purchase order for a million and give us a penny off? I'm like, okay. And our margins were good, and we ended up saving this customer. I don't know what the dollar figure was, but their scrap rate was over 60%. And when we made the product, our scrap rate was less than 2%. And then that flowed into their scrap rate because our product was so good that we sold to them. And then we get to the end of the product, they sent in the stuff for us to cut, and we get to the end of it, and it's 700,000 pieces. And I'm like, guys, I gave you a discount for a million parts. We were 300,000 pieces short. Where's the rest? And they're like, all the, so and so messed up the product. That's all we have. And I'm like, well,
Yeah,
that's a lot of money,
yeah,
on both ends. And I'm like, these guys don't care if we succeed or not.
yeah.
Their agenda is them, and it was just so frustrating to, build what you think is a long term relationship, and they knew on the front end probably that, they were not going to follow through.
We spend a lot of time in our sales efforts, obviously, to build a relationship and understand what's driving the investment. But the
Hmm.
next step in our process is to get really engaged in the decision making process. Who
Hmm.
does it? How do they do it? What's the drivers? And
Yep.
because it's not always the cost. We've been very successful with our longest customers and
Hmm.
another set of customers over the last 5 years that are all very cultural based on transparency and trust and
Yep.
humility. And but then you get involved in the one that isn't, and it's sometimes it's difficult for us because if you ask me what this cup costs, I'm going to tell you what it costs. I'm not adding $5 onto it because I know you're going to ask me tomorrow, hey, can you take $5 off that? We're just not wired that way,
Yeah.
and so we have to work on that very clearly, and we have to have our BD guys come back and say, this is the decision making process. No matter what we do, it's
Yep.
going through that door at the end.
Yeah. And for us, it's understanding the customer's end goal. Why are you bringing this to us? Is it new? Okay, that's easy. It's new and you need help. Or are you having trouble with it? Is your current, supplier or partner, are they just not delivering? Is there a quality issue there? Are they always late? Um, or are they too slow? What's going on? And if we can understand that up front and we can help fix that problem, then you're right. Prices is really never a conversation because we're fixing their problem.
Yeah. Yep.
And even though we're doing something pretty simple in a lot of cases, if we're fixing a problem like you're fixing problems, then price is always second or third.
I worked for a firm called Okanite, wire and cable manufacturer years ago, and they were fantastic. Worked in a commodity market selling medium
Hmm.
and high voltage cable products. Largely, the price of copper aluminum drove the price. We sold at margins significantly over our competitor based on the interaction with the customer,
Hmm.
the service support, the 40-year warranty we gave. Every engagement was different. We took the commodity out of the product. Couldn't win them all. Some of them were low bid numbers, but you certainly won the ones you wanted to win, which were the
Yep.
customers that appreciated those things and would invite you back. And so, if you can get to a volume where you have a volume, it's primarily dominated by good customers, and you don't have to
Hmm.
deal with the bad ones, you can make the problem
Yeah.
go away. But it's kind of
Yeah.
hard to get enough people in the wagon.
Yeah. Well, and I think it builds confidence too. And one of the things that we had installed, we had a couple different people give us bids, and we ended up going with the highest priced company, and it was significant. It was 300% more than the next person, and
That sounds like my wife's choice in getting her hair done.
well, I'm going to leave that alone.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because somebody said, "Well, sir, they're 300% more. Why are you choosing to go with these guys? You could save X number of dollars." And I'm like, "Because I trust them, and they educated me, and I understand why they're 300% more."
Yeah.
The other folks, they just turned in a bid. They didn't tell me how it was going to be done. I don't even know if they have experience doing it really because of the questions that they asked or didn't ask. It was
Hmm.
probably more about the questions that they did not ask me. Um, and at the end of the day, I just know it's going to be done properly, and they're not going to come back to me and ask for more money.
Hmm.
And I felt
Hmm.
that the other customer or the other folks, they may get into it and realize that they screwed up, and then they come back and double or triple their price. And I'm like, I'm just gonna, let's just go with the company that I feel comfortable with.
That's what it comes down to. It's all about the trust.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
When we look at our team performance, we always start with trust.
Yeah,
And if you can't trust your partner, if you can't trust your coworker, or can't trust your customer, probably in the wrong room.
and same with your teammates. And
Yeah.
as soon as you lose trust for your teammates, then why are they there? I mean, that's a cultural thing.
Hmm.
But we can squirrel off on that at a different day. Um, Speaking of trust, what about AI? How do you, um, that was a big conversation. It's still a big conversation. We talk about it all the time in our Vistage group, and me personally, I didn't trust AI for how long has Chat GPT been out? Years, 3 or 4 years, maybe.
Yeah, three or
I don't
four years,
know,
I believe.
3 or 4 years, and I didn't use it until this year just because I'm like, what, like it artificial intelligence? No, like I can write my own emails or
Yeah.
do whatever. And one of my buddies spent a bunch of time with me, Brooks, that owns an AI company, and it blew my mind. I mean, it really did. It blew my mind, and just the things that I'm able to accomplish. I use it every day. I use Superhuman. I just started using that this week. First time I really felt confident that I'm getting through my emails and I'm really on task there. And there's some things like one of my buddies got quarantined because he sent me some real estate to look at, and it felt that he was trying to sell me, so it tagged it as spam and put it in an archive folder. But
No, really.
I had to get in and put him in, take him out of jail.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's I don't know. It's pretty cool in my book.
It's certainly the great unwashed. And in our world,
Hmm.
we have a task force put together right now, 5 people, and we're bringing an intern on this summer, a real bright kid from University of Kansas that's a computer engineer to help us develop a strategy.
Hmm.
And what we know is this is that one of the big benefits of AI, and again, I'm not any scholar on AI, so but from my interaction with it, both personally and with our business, is that one of the big benefits of it is the groupthink, right? You get all these, the benefit of everybody putting their thoughts and ideas into this, and the best ones
Hmm.
come out. With what we do, where we have a lot of customer data on products and buildings and operational systems and networks, it's going to have to be our own in-house AI.
Hmm.
It's not going to be out. Nobody else is going to have access to it. So
Right.
there'll be some limitations because we're
Right.
only as good as what we think.
Hmm.
But if you think about it, I actually, when you asked this question and when Emily and Amanda put the agenda together, I asked AI, "What about AI for what we do?"
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I tried to write down what I thought. I had three
Hmm.
quick bullet points, and quicker than I could finish it, they gave me seven. And
Hmm.
so I'll just read them to you. One is automate repetitive tasks. In
Hmm.
designing
Yeah.
and building products and systems, and that's a lot of money saving. It's a big efficiency.
Yeah.
Enhance creativity and innovation. If we can get better at what we're designing today, tomorrow, and we need, our customers are demanding that. If they can help us, check. Improve decision making. I think we'd all sign up for that one. I know my wife would.
Hmm.
For me, streamline the design process. Again, more efficiency, cost savings.
Yep.
Enhance the client engagement, optimize resources, and develop an ethical framework. There's nothing about those seven that any of us wouldn't sign up for in running our businesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
The question is, how do you do it? And that's right. We all have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so we have things like design documents, schedules, preliminary plans, estimates. AI can impact all of that. It can. And in fact, we won 2 projects this week. It never happens. We got a PO yesterday and a PO today for 2 projects, and I can't really talk about them other than the fact that they're very similar. 2 different companies with 2 different products. The application of the 2 products are very similar, including the size and quantity and scale of what they're trying to do. And we have opportunities to do front-end planning and potentially build systems in the buildings for them. If we were fully spun up on the AI right now, we could save them both a ton of time because we could design one. It's like, you design once and they could build, both firms could use the technology.
Yep.
We're not there yet. And we're taking our time too, because it's not completely fully vetted. Certainly an engineer has to check all the data, right? You can't just say, hey, how big should this be? He's going to have to check it all. But long term, I think it's transformative. I think it changes. I mean, for me personally, if you look at like the emergence of the home computer, when everybody said nobody's ever going to have a computer at home, then you had the emergence of the internet, then you had the emergence of the phone. I think the emergence of AI is the 4th great technology transformation in the last 50 years, and we're right in the beginning of it.
Yeah. And we use it too, just to evaluate different opportunities that we get, because what we do while we offer a similar service, what we could end up doing is vastly different.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, well, how do we, I'll get in and do, I'm trying to talk about a project, not talk about a project, as you can tell. But I can run rates and it gives me an idea, and it gives me a baseline on, what I know about the project. So I'll put everything in about the project that I think I know. And then, I'll go through and build out rates and what machinery we need and where the improvements are, what am I missing, and really build out and we'll build out a scope of work, an SOP in AI. And you can tell it to write it in an ISO format and things like that. And then you get it and you just go through it and pick it apart and find, it's not perfect. There's going to be errors, but there's certainly more times than not, it'll bring up things. And I'm like, geez, I didn't even think about that. Yeah. I would have missed that if it was just me putting everything into a spreadsheet. And it's been it's been transformative for us. We talked about, some marketing that we've done with it just to help us write different articles or do market research. If we know a really good customer and we want to go after, more of those customers, it'll do that research for you in seconds, where it would take 3 or 4 people a couple days to do that research. And
I know this,
fantastic.
It's really hard to really, really become much more difficult to stump my buddies with obscure athletic statistics.
Yeah, I mean, on a fun personal note, like it's been fun. Like one of my buddies is having a birthday, so I'm like, write an email in a roast form, and he enjoys smoking cigars, drinking whiskey, and he's a horrible golfer. And I'm like, really drive that home, and write it in Joe Rogan's tone or whatever. Yeah. It's like I could never write that email, right. And it's it's fun, and everyone gets a little chuckle out of it, and
I think the application of AI, in just a few months, years, is just going to touch so much of our life.
Mm-hmm. And it is scary. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, it can be, for everything good that people are using it for, people are using it for bad stuff too. And it's, there's some scary stuff out there about it. But I think that comes with, all technology. I mean, the internet, computers, phones, everything. You could, for everything great that it does, somebody's doing something bad with it. And it's just the nature of humans.
Well, this is a perfect segue. The last bullet point that AI says about AI is there's a human touch. Your comment. There's a human component to this that's not to be disregarded. It's not a replacement. It's going to be an enhancement. And so if you think about that, because somebody has to own it, and if anybody, as long as you have to own it, you're going to want to double check. But that
Hmm.
is so true. Whether it gets in the wrong, it's used for not the right purposes, or it's not correct at times. But so yeah, there's definitely a human component to it. I think one day it's going to be a database with a brain, and that we'll just be in the corner being fed food and wheeled around the room. But I think that's going to be a ways away.
Yeah, hopefully not in my lifetime, but
Yeah,
I definitely I think it is a positive tool to have. My son, he's 22. He works for one of my buddies, and one of the dispatchers that schedules his team. She was sending these guys like all over the place, and he's like, how do I help her fix this? So he plugged in all the locations that his team needed to go to into AI, and he's like, produce the best route that drives less miles and makes, blah blah blah. And so he created the schedule in minutes for his folks,
yeah,
and it would take her,
yeah,
all day, and she'd mess up, and people are backtracking, and you're
yeah,
burning twice as much fuel, and he wrote all this and went into the office and taught her, and he's like, we're going to save thousands of dollars just in fuel, let alone time, and she was just blown away, and now her job has become easier because of it.
yeah. No, yeah. And then there's going to be applications we're not even considering, right?
Sure.
That are going to be, I don't want to say gone, enhanced.
Yeah, absolutely enhanced. And for us, I think it's a quoting tool. I think that, we could write different code, not me because I'm, that's way above my pay grade, but somebody smarter than me can, write code in AI that's going to help our quoting, and we're going to be more efficient. We're going to not make mistakes. We're not going to miss things as
Yeah,
much, and we'll be able to get quotes back immediately. Um, in the machining world and laser cutting world, paperless parts they've been doing it for years. And the days that you thought that you could drag and drop a PDF of a widget into a computer screen and you'd get a quote back immediately and it'd be accurate. I mean, those guys have been doing that for years, and then AI is just going to enhance that.
yeah. It's no different with the layout of your new line. Where you have,
Hmm.
if you hired some smart people or you guys did it yourself because you're experienced, and nobody knows your process better than you. AI is going to enhance it. They're going to bring up, it's
Hmm.
going to bring up some things you haven't considered, and
Yeah.
maybe optimize some geometries that you hadn't thought about.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a cool tool,
I
and
do
I
too.
think that it helps with the systems integration that what we're going to talk about next, in the automotive and aerospace industries, and this has to be part of the systems integration.
Yeah,
And I mean, I think it helps everything from implementing process to tying it out with the system and then bringing it all together.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly the best utilization of AI. I'm 100% on board with that.
Hmm. Yeah, and we have used it to review quotes that are given to us. So somebody sent me a quote, and I'm like, without this thing being redlined, I'm never going to pick out everything that's different. And I dropped both PDFs into Chat GPT, and I'm like, outline the differences here for me. And
Yeah,
it did. Bloop, put them
and it
side
did.
by side, and like, okay, now it would have taken me all day to read that because I have horrible ADHD, and I would have had to come back to it 7 times.
Yeah, yeah. You and me both.
Yeah, so with systems integration in aerospace and automotive, what are you guys looking at there?
Yeah, those marketplace. It's what we're talking about. It's that you're more automation, more having to put things together and make it
Hmm.
work. And the more inputs you have, the more integration you need. And so
Hmm.
we've been in our number one sell since we began in 1994 has been making sure it works when we leave. Um,
Hmm.
and that's all about being system integrated. And,
Yeah.
and for us, we're talking about some traditional mechanical systems oftentimes. So there's building infrastructure and there's process infrastructure, and they
Hmm.
need to support one another. And there's a gap between the two. And so oftentimes it's a gap just in the scope of supply. One firm delivers building infrastructure, chillers, HVAC, etc.
Hmm.
Another firm delivers process equipment, whether it be line or test equipment or PLC work or data acquisition systems,
Hmm.
and they're different scopes. So the customer has been forced to deal with it themselves, and
Hmm.
making sure they're married. And so you have to define the requirements of the process give that to the infrastructure folks. They have to size the equipment appropriately and
Mm-hmm.
then manufacture and make it. And they send it and it's got to be set, installed, and commissioned.
Mm-hmm.
We do all that for the customer. So I think, and we have, and it's our in tandem deliverable, and it's a plan, execute, verify mentality. I think we do a really good job there of asking questions the customer hasn't considered. And if you think about what is the essence of systems integration, that's what it is. What aren't you thinking about right now? Because if it doesn't, as we talked about last time, if you want to talk about saving money, get your line up and running and making product as soon as you're done putting it in. If it even goes a week with that gap, you've lost all the money you spent in the front end buying it cheaper. And then you have those operational issues downstream. If it's not sized correctly, it's located correctly, you got inefficiencies for the life. Have you ever put a line in and had to go back and move it a month later? No, you live with it. And so those are the things for us, like that we say, hey, and we could learn a ton from you, Justin, sit around and talk about what didn't work. And then we take that forward to the next opportunity. We have a couple guys here who are very good at conceptualizing things, turning radiuses and throughput, utilization rates, material transport. And have really good conversations with people about, hey, what have you thought about this yet? And most of the time, they haven't because they're doing 15 other things.
Yeah. You're hitting a lot of hot buttons for me just with the line that we just put in. We were down for a week before we put our first piece of product through it. And there was one machine that we bought and it was new and we got it and it didn't work. And there was electrical issues and there were a lot of issues with it. But they got, somebody drove in from Philadelphia and they spent I think maybe 3 days in our facility, tearing the thing apart and getting it working for us. And if we would have bought a piece of machinery from overseas, that would have never happened. We would have had to hire somebody to come in. But, to your point, when we build out this next blending line, it's a lot more involved. It's all going to be automated. It's going to have bulk tanks and pneumatic lines, feeding the machine. And it'll, somebody from a computer will operate the thing. And then all the finished goods will go into, other bulk tanks. And for me, I'm trying to get my head around and design this out. And I know I'm going to miss something. And you just hit like 7 hot buttons for me with, the line that we put in. Now it's going to work. It'll work at the end of the day, but there's 10 things that I would have done differently on the next line that we put in. And that's coming up, probably within the next year that we'll put in this bigger line and it'll handle, 10 times the capacity that we're working with now. But it's really making me rethink, just tackling it on my own.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, it's going to work because you're a smart guy and you have access to good people that'll come in and fix it. So when people get involved in situations, it isn't like, oh my gosh. But the reality is it costs you more money, and it costs you more money with respect to productivity and downstream, which is way outweighs the capital cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you're down production and you could be making whatever widget and you can't, and you have people standing around staring at it, and anxiety is high, and people are frustrated and things like that. Your customers, if you're missing deadlines with your customers, then it's ruining relationships and things like that. So I love what you guys do.
Well, I would urge you to try to engage someone from your industry or even some guys at ACS that actually understand. So our system integration team is pretty unique because the other side of the equation that we have that we can do, I don't want to make this a damn commercial, but we build too. We build systems. So our integrators go out and say, okay, what do you want to do? What's commercially available? Hey, there's some 800-pound gorillas that build production lines for blending. Okay, let's go out and find the top 3. You tell us who they are. We put together scopes of work so they're all bidding to the same document. And it's really important the documents are complete because if there's ambiguity in your documents, it's going to drive cost up for you, and there's no certainty of outcome on the backside. So you spend some time getting the design criteria developed. And then the other side of it is, what's the stuff that you can't find off the shelf? Then you got to find some houses to go out and build that. And typically, in most facilities, it's not all 100% canned goods. There's some unique custom one-off stuff, and so we can actually design and build that here, or help people find a local shop to go do that. We oftentimes do the design here in house, and we have about a 50,000 square foot manufacturing facility where we build all the time. And then the other side of that equation today is collecting the data off the process to make it optimized. So in the past, it was the PLCs were more about safety.
Hmm.
e-stops, those type of things. Now they're plugging in DAX systems based on NI platforms that are very robust. You can collect data and measure your productivity, measure your uptime, measure your utilization rate. So you can,
Hmm.
and then you can, and there's another application for AI and not too far away,
Right.
optimizing that. And low
Yeah.
hanging fruit. It's kind of like you remember 10 years ago, everybody was going into existing plants and trying to remove very cost intensive infrastructure, light bulbs, transit things. They were trying to
Yeah.
replace all these things. There was some real low hanging fruit that you could do that would drive 90% of the cost out. It's the
Hmm.
same thing in production. There's some things that you can do at a very, very macro level that has very significant impact. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, the side of a good integrator. And, you've heard Factory 2.0 or the connected enterprise or the industrial Internet of Things.
Hmm.
This has been going on for 25 years, like you said
Sure.
earlier. People are doing this a long time, especially people like you that this is your business to make things.
Yeah.
And you know exactly what needs to happen. How do you harness that knowledge and apply it to somewhere else?
Yeah. And we sometimes we think we know what needs to happen, and we think we know the size of the machine that we need, and we think we know the agitator that needs to go in the machine, and then when we actually start doing it, we're like, oh, maybe that could have been a little different, or maybe we should have done this. And comparing two quotes from two different companies, are they the same? Like you were talking about, scope of work and things like that, and you kind of, you know, I always go back to the term squirrel off. It's like, well, this company's doing this, maybe that's the right way to do it, but maybe they're doing that because that's all they can do, and it's not really the right thing. But they're selling you on that because that's their one trick pony. And company B has seven solutions, and they suggest something totally different. So there's a lot to take into consideration.
Well, it's so hard when in some of these conversations to really listen because like all of us do. I think I'm going to screw up the story, but I think it was Teddy Roosevelt who used to always go to like cocktail parties and make stories up because people weren't listening to him. They were so busy wanting to tell him a story about themselves, they would
Right.
never listen to him. It's the same thing in our business where when you hear about a problem, you're already forming a solution scenario in your head without fully listening to the customer and what's the real problem here or how much
Hmm.
more so our guy we work really hard on saying, hey, don't take notes, listen, don't make any suggestions, let's go
Yep.
back and let's think about it as a team. And guess what, the group think comes up with a better idea, or AI comes up with a better idea,
Yep.
and you can optimize what you're offering there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Internet of Things, the systems integration for us, it's a core reason because our guys make things work. And what happens when they leave, the last guys on the floor are the controls guys, the PLC guys, who are
Hmm.
programming the controllers to control the processes. So if we do everything right, even if we screwed up the project, Dustin, we have a good rapport going out because when we leave, it works.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and, and we don't leave until it works is probably the most important thing that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times, we're good at doing what we do, but we're not good at making things work sometimes.
Yeah.
If somebody had a gun to my head and wanted me to reprogram a machine or change the wiring in it, I would die. It's not like, I don't
Yeah.
know how to read a wiring diagram. I mean, unless it's all color coded, might be able to figure that one out. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Well,
yeah,
there's a lot of customers that don't know how to read plans.
yeah,
They know what they want it to look like, and they know what they
yeah,
want it to do. But
yeah.
between A and Z, what is all this? That's where we
Well,
can really add a
yeah.
lot of value.
Yeah, and even the manufacturing layout, I think I know what's the best process on how to do it. But
Sure.
if somebody, comes in and they've done it before and they can suggest how the workflow and where things should go, and um, you know, I think it should be on this end of the building, but like your point earlier, the electrics is on the other side of the building. You'd save 50, 60, $70,000 potentially
And then and
or
the other
more.
conversation that's never had, and it should be had in the first meeting, is operations and maintenance. So
Mm-hmm.
the systems that you get put in, they need to be accessible for your guys to come in and maintain them.
Yeah.
And so many times, I can tell you a funny story about and where we built a system and they didn't have a budget at the end. So there was there was a ground floor and two levels of mezzanine for support equipment, and we had one staircase going to the first level and one going to the second level. you couldn't go from second level back to the first level, or excuse me, second level and third level. So it was like Donkey Kong. You had to go up to one level, and to go up there, you had to go back down and go back up. And
Oh, jeez.
and it was little things like that where you're looking at it and going, how did this decision ever get made? And
Hmm.
nobody made the decision. There was no ladders at all, no accessibility at all, because it wasn't their core business. Nobody went
Hmm.
through it. So at the end, they got a change order for $50,000 to put a couple ladders in that they still got made fun of over. And
Hmm.
I know it's that kind of a cute, funny, anecdotal story, but it's real. And people don't think about, hey, how am I going to get to this equipment to maintain it
Yeah.
when it's in? And
Yeah.
that's a big issue, right? And sometimes you have to move it around to get into it, which is even
Right.
more timely with respect to shutdowns and et cetera.
Yeah. And that takes me back to my paper mill days when I was working in paper mills. It was really wild to see everything that went in once a big mill shut down with all
Yeah.
lockout and people crawling around and how they're moving rolls. And I mean everything could kill you on that thing. I mean it was
Yes.
like one mistake away from a death.
All the time. All the time. Yeah. And that's the thing today. I'd say, I think one of the big positives about how we've learned as an organization, as an industry, is
Hmm.
the dedication, the commitment to safety today
Yep.
from the customer, the supplier, the subcontractor, and the material suppliers. Everybody has got a major commitment to safety, which is a
Yeah.
great thing, right? And
Yeah.
and because that wasn't always the case, and today it is. And we start off every day with safety discussions. Our job sites, our site superintendents have safety discussions. Our customers demand it. Even if we didn't want to do it, we wouldn't be on site if we weren't doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up safety because that's definitely a core thing with us. Everything is. I don't want anyone losing fingers. I certainly don't want anyone dying. And we got into a pretty heated discussion with somebody recently that was supporting us, and they were responsible for some safety items, and they just flat out told us they weren't doing it. And we're like, how can you have that stance?
Yeah,
I just don't. I can't get my head around it, and um, I don't understand that mentality. It's so like I didn't even know how to respond,
yeah,
and they're like, well, we'll just do it. I mean, it's your responsibility. You're supposed to be, it's in the contract that you do these things, but your stance is that you're not going to do it, and it
yeah.
is just
It's probably not
unbelievable.
a fit. We have
No.
we have some site supers that are been around forever. They're wise. They're very knowledgeable. And we were interviewing for a job down in Miami, and they asked us what our safety plan was. And before anybody could answer, he stood up and said, "It's very simple. Everybody goes home safe every day.
Hmm.
Everything that we do will be for that reason."
Yep.
And fortunately, there was a book behind it too, so he just didn't make it up on the fly. But
Yeah.
but it's true, and he lives
Yeah.
it. We live it, and it's just in our environments, right? You've got a manufacturing facility. We're working with all these active live plants. It's a real
Yep.
issue, and it should
Yeah.
be our number one concern.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean it is ours. I mean, I would rather go out of business than somebody get hurt or
Yeah,
die in our facility. And we for me, everyone's looking at me, okay, what are we gonna do? Are you just gonna turn your head or are you gonna stick up for it? And that, for me, that's easy.
yeah,
I'd rather never do business with that person ever again in my life.
yeah.
Um, than give up safety just because you know, that's his stance. I mean, good for
Sure.
you. Go be unsafe somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, not
But
here. Well,
yeah.
we've got a lot of young employees, and I think I mentioned last time we talked. We really focus on, like, as we look forward, what do we want to do different? We want to keep
Hmm.
the momentum going, both with our culture and with our
Hmm.
customers. And our
Yeah.
culture is hugely important to us. And
Yep.
one of the ways we do that is empower our young engineers and young
Yes.
employees. It's the same reason I'm sitting here, and Amanda and Emily is a newer employee for us, and she's heavily engaged in our messaging,
Yeah.
and she's empowered to make decisions on behalf of our firm in a really short. And you have to earn that, but in a relatively short amount of time. And I think that's that's one of the reasons of driving our success right now is we have a really motivated team that make a decision on behalf of our firm. We'll support you 100% of the time. Make the right decision. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yep. And I'm fumbling right now because I just had a podcast and he wrote a book it was called Enabling Empowerment, and it's a fantastic book. We had a great podcast, and the guy's name is Chris Schaefert, and he wrote a book in empowering teams for better decision making. Great podcast. The book is great. I just got done reading it, and it's a short read, but it's all about enabling empowerment, and there's nothing stronger, in my opinion, than for culture when people feel empowered and they're not afraid to bring ideas to the table, good or bad.
Yeah.
And we just hired somebody recently, and we installed this new machine, and it was wired backwards. Second machine wired incorrectly, by the way, and it had an auger in it. And the auger, we would turn it on, and the auger would kick off within seconds. And we're like, "What is going on?" I thought that the electric motor was sized incorrectly, or the density of the material was too big, or something. My mind was all over the place. And we like empty all the material out, and they're like, "Okay, well, it runs, but it doesn't run when the material's in there." And we're looking at it, and I'm like, "This freaking auger is going backwards." So it's just power driving all the
Yeah.
material into the bottom of the conveyor. And we get it all cleaned out, and we change the wiring, and we get it working properly. And this young man goes, "Sir, I saw that 2 hours ago." And I'm like, why didn't you say something? I totally missed it.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Well, I didn't know if I should." He goes,
Yeah.
"I didn't think it was my place." And I'm like, man, I go, I don't care even if you were wrong. If you thought you see something that you think is out of place, always say something. He's like, "Well, what if I was wrong?" I'm like, "What if you were right?"
Yeah.
And he just kind of a light bulb went off. I'm like, if you're wrong
Yeah.
about something, that's okay. We troubleshoot that, and if we're like, "No, that's good. Let's move on." But in your situation, you saw something that wasn't correct. You were afraid to bring it up, and you were correct. It would have saved us 4 hours.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Okay." He goes, "So in the future, I need to bring." I'm like, "Yes, 100%." And if you see process that, always challenge everything. And if you think a process could be improved by something, and we change and it doesn't improve it, then we just go back to the old process. But if your idea improves process, then we grow as a company. So there's no bad ideas.
There's no bad idea, and he'll
Yeah.
never forget that conversation either.
Yeah.
And, that's very powerful. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how improvements get made unless people have access to input.
Mhm.
We're getting ready to go off site in a month or two for our annual planning meeting, and we're going to talk a lot about innovation, um, and process improvement.
Mhm.
Because one of the ways we can keep our success is improve our processes and continue to try to innovate. And
Yeah.
in the past, and it's funny you say that. Tell a story about your young employee. One of the things that we're going to do this time is solicit input from our team. Our management team is going to
Mhm.
go off by themselves, but I'm going to solicit input from our entire team on process
Mhm.
improvements before we go.
Yeah.
And I think I talked about a chart we used last time called a stop, start, keep,
I think so.
and I'm going to load that up with these ideas and have people critique them. And
Mhm.
and I know certainly we're going to get some good ideas out here that we haven't even considered. And
Oh, absolutely.
you know,
Yep. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There was another book that I read that really pushes that, and I can't remember off the top of my head.
well,
But
since we're talking
anyways,
about books, I did look at the Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. You recommended that last time,
yeah, how'd you
and
like that?
I liked it a lot. It was very analogous to Lancioni's Five Dysfunctions. It's all about belonging and trusting
Mhm.
and being connected. And I really enjoyed it, and I believe in it too. When you read it, it's like if you're not connected, if you don't feel safe, if you can't
Mhm.
trust,
Yep.
you're not going to be a high performer. I'm
Well,
reading Lencioni's
yeah.
second book called The Ideal Team Player, and
Okay.
and you love it. It's part of his book series, and it's a really good story because they're big growth and they're having to add resources to do the work they have,
Mhm.
and they're really worried that hiring this many people. And long and short of it, he vows down to they don't want to hire any jackasses. That's what they say.
Mhm.
No jackasses, because when you hire them,
Right.
it's usually because they're high performers and it's hard to get rid of them. And the whole mantra, the motto of the book is be hungry, humble, and smart.
Mhm.
And if employees aren't then you shouldn't hire them. And that should be readily apparent in the interview in the front end. And It is. It's not, this stuff isn't always rocket science. It's just, think about it every day.
Yeah.
And once we read it, you're like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. And I wrote down 4 or 5 books in our last Visage meeting that the guy that was a speaker, he came in and spoke for 90 minutes and he talked about a lot about EOS and then he had written a couple books and he talks a lot about dogs and terrorists and and puppies and he had all these acronyms for different people. But he was like, if you have a terrorist in your organization that is a high performer, but they are hijacking everything, he's like, just because they're a high performer, you got to get them out of there.
Yeah.
And they're going to do more harm than good. And it was just really interesting, talking about culture and he's like, in all situations, when there's a terrorist in your organization, it's hard to let them go because they do make a significant difference. When you let them go, people will come and thank you.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's true. I mean, if you got somebody in there just, causing all kinds of issues and they think that they're, indispensable, then they're causing more harm than good.
Yeah. And we've all encountered them. Right. And it is difficult because you get overshadowed by their contribution.
Yep.
And we've certainly had that over the last 30 years, a few of those situations. I think sometimes they wash out because they realize they're a square peg in the round hole. Other times you have to move them along. And I think that's probably in our roles, certainly the hardest thing to do, right, is move people out that are high performers. But it's necessary if they don't fit the culture. I'm 100% on board with you on that.
Yep. I had an old mentor that he said, I am okay with helping you find happiness elsewhere. So, but cool. Well, as always, I mean, I think we could talk for the rest of the day and night. I definitely want to come up and visit you. I think that would be a lot of fun and we can go fishing or duck hunting up in your neck of the woods and you get down this way, we can do the same thing.
I've got 2 ideas for you when you come up. I'm gonna invite you up. We're gonna fly fish and we're gonna float fish. But the float fish is gonna be a little different. It's gonna be on a pontoon boat. And you're going about 3 miles an hour. And but yeah, love to have you up. And as always, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today.
No, I love it. And now we have some new books to read and all that fun stuff. So thank you.
You're welcome, and continued success. There's obviously no mistake by why you're having so much success. And I'm happy for you. Yeah,
you either, and I'm super happy for you. And real quick, again, tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, sure. I'm Scott Hoselton, president of ACS. My email address is shoselton@acscm.com, and our website is acscm.com. And there's ways to get a hold of me there. And for those of you that are listening that wanted to talk about your businesses, or I'd love to engage with you and have an opportunity to learn from you as well. I've been fortunate to sit on a few boards with some really talented people, and I'd love to share some of those anecdotal stories as well.
Yeah, and if you're driving or whatever and you couldn't write it down, go in the comments or whatever, in the description rather, and you'll find that information there. So cool, man.
Hey,
well, thanks again.
Thanks for your time. And I wish I would say good luck to the Buckeyes, but I'm hoping the Badgers can move up a little bit next year.
Yeah, well, we all have dreams. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this episode of MFG Monkey. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please email them to us at info@mfgmonkey.com.